on that. That's our job. The 9066 executive order is a great example. We don't normally say, yeah, let's go take all these people who potentially might be a threat to our country because of their ethnicity, and let's just hold them. Let's just keep them, you know, and not, like, most of us would never be okay with that. But during this time of emergency, a lot of times, like, our sense of security gets heightened, and we take this backseat, and we've allowed them to do those sorts of things. Inevitably, there's a pushback to the next president. Like Truman really struggled, and Congress, like, pushed him all the time when he tried to act like this wartime president, because they go, well, wait a minute, you don't have a declaration of war for Korea, and so we're not going to let you do this kind of stuff. Okay. All right, and the president also has this idea called executive privilege, and this is going to sound crazy when I say it to you, but it is real. Executive privilege means that the law does not always apply to the president the way it would apply to you and I, specifically in relationship to the court and our information. Okay? So if Udom gets a subpoena today to go to court, a subpoena would be an order to go to court and then to have to testify and answer the questions of the lawyer in court. And unless it's going to incriminate him, he has to answer those questions. If the president were in the same situation, then the president could claim executive privilege. And if the court respects that, then he would not be subject to that subpoena.
Doesn't the wife get that too?
Yes, your spouse. Yes, Morgan.
Can you just plead the fifth?
You can, but the pleading the fifth is only relevant to incriminating you. So, like, let's say Udom, like, witnessed a crime, and he's like, I don't want to testify because I'm afraid. The Fifth Amendment won't apply. Like, he has to testify still. So, here's the deal. I'll give you an example. President Clinton claimed executive privilege. He was sued by a woman named Paula Jones for sexual harassment. So, as president, he said, well, you can't sue me now. I'm the president. I have executive privilege, and I'm immune from this kind of lawsuit. The Supreme Court did not agree because that was no danger. Like, executive privilege is going to it's going to apply, like, if the president has information that would put troops in danger, would cause Americans to lose their lives, not just that it's going to tarnish the office of the presidency or make somebody look bad. So executive privilege is super, super narrow. The court said in U.S. versus Nixon that it is totally a real thing. When Nixon claimed to have it, they said, oh, it's real, but you don't have it. It was Jones' case, but he also didn't have it. So it's a real thing. It's just going to be really specific and narrow. Nixon claimed it when Congress subpoenaed him to turn over the Watergate tapes. He said, I don't have to. I am immune from this. And the court said, no, you're not. Sean, did you have a question?
Okay.
Okay. So does that make sense? This is a hard one for people to kind of wrap their brains around. I think because we don't have a lot of instances of it, but I think it would just be like, you know, if Congress, let's say Congress was investigating military operations in the Middle East, and they told the president he had to come testify at this hearing, and the questions that they were going to ask him would be specific information that would tell them, like, stuff that, like, soldiers were doing right now that would cause them to lose their lives. Well, then he could claim executive privilege, because that could actually cause a lot of danger, and people could be hurt.
I actually have a question.
Okay.
So, in the Frost Nixon movie, like, the end of it is, like, when Frost gets really angry and asks him the question, like, do you think you're above the law? And Nixon's like, when the president of the United States says it, it's not illegal.
Yeah.
Did he actually say that?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was...
Claiming executive privilege where he doesn't exist.
A lot of people, when they talk about Nixon, they claim that he was like an imperial president, and it is that sense that I'm king-like, you know. And as the president, that doesn't apply to me, you know. And you can make a justification for presidents having kind of like different powers, but that's certainly not the intention that what our framers had.
And like that was the turning point afterwards. He was like, maybe it's time to stop. But
yeah. I'm so glad you watched that. It's really cool. Okay, here's our last one, you guys. We're almost done here. All right, institutional presidency. All that means is that it does not matter who occupies the office of the presidency. The office itself holds such regard and esteem and prestige and power that they can use that office to try to accomplish things. let's see if I can give you an example of institutional presidency. The president walked in the room right now, what would you do?
Yeah, we kind of freak out.
So, do you know what the protocol would be if the president comes in the room? Like, have you ever seen that? Like, when a president walks in, everybody stands up. So, I remember watching an interview with President Obama. It was like a fluffy, like a fun kind of interview shortly after he was inaugurated. And they asked him, well, so what's the craziest thing about being president now? And he said it was that when he would walk into the room, people would stand up. And it threw him off, because a lot of the people he was with are people who had run his campaign, they had been his friends, like he was Barack to those people. But then they'd walk in and they'd be like, Mr. President. He didn't change, but the institution that comes along with him had now changed and shaped people's relationship. That just gives him something that other people don't have. And so it really does allow him, in a way, to influence policy differently than our other institutions might. Okay? All right, hang with me just a little bit more. We're just about done. So, at the bottom of your sheet, what you guys have, you have a list, and it's the roles of the president. So, what a lot of people who take maybe like a broad view of presidential power and really like view the presidency as like super important to shaping policy, talk about this concept called the roles of the president. All it means is that you take these powers and you think about, well, how do these powers relate daily to what the president is doing, and how do presidents balance all of these expectations? Because no longer is the president simply a law enforcer. You know, we expect our president to be many things all at once, and so it's like they're wearing different hats. So all I'm going to do is explain what these roles are, and then we'll look at a couple of roles so you would have examples. Okay? It's a really easy way if you're ever asked to write about presidential power. It's a great way to classify it because it gives you a lot of good examples. So when we think about chief executive, obviously that's like, I think of that as being like CEO. You know, if you think, so a lot of you have friends that maybe go to different high schools in Frisco, and they do things differently, right? Like we all kind of have our own culture. Who ultimately does the culture emanate from at your school? The principal. It's a top-down kind of thing, right? So like our principal has a different socialization, a different expectation. He's older than a lot of the other principals are, so he has kind of like a different model for how the school's going to be run. I have friends at other schools whose jobs as social studies teachers are really different than mine, even though we all work in the same district, because our chief executive has created a different expectation. That's pretty much it. So law enforcement, making appointments, kind of just making decisions, issuing executive orders, like all of that stuff is being chief executive. All right, chief legislator. What do you think chief legislator is doing? Yeah, it's vetoing, signing bills. It's anything in relationship to the legislature is being chief legislator. So the video that you watched where LBJ was using his relationship with members of Congress to try to get the Civil Rights Act passed, that is a phenomenal example of chief legislator. Even though it's really informal, the fact that he knew that he had to pick up the phone and he had to call individual members of Congress to secure their vote, that's so chief legislator because he knows how Congress works. Then we have this idea of chief diplomat. Modern presidents do this a lot because our world's gotten so much smaller. You can't have 535 people establish your relationship with another country. You need one person to do that. And so a president has kind of become like the face of America in relationship to other countries. So they sit down, they negotiate treaties, they just like establish rapport. Chief of state or chief citizen. You can call it either. I prefer chief of state, but either one is fine. Because we don't have royalty in our country, we expect our president to do this. It's the ceremony involved in the presidency. It can be the humanity. You know, I mean, people love to know like human things about their president. You know, they want to know about their personal lives, like what do they eat, and you like to see them like eat a cheeseburger or talk about their failings or whatever. But it's also the like real human part of it. So if God forbid there was like a horrible tornado that came through here, you know, President Obama could say, oh, that's a disaster area. We need FEMA to come in and aid in recovery. And he could ask Congress to allocate funds. He could call in the military if we needed military aid. But if he walks up to Riley and hugs her and says, "I'm so sorry for your loss," in that moment he's being chief of state because he's being a role model for like our expectation of who we are as a people and like your community. Commander-in-chief is real obvious. That's all that military stuff that we talked about. And then finally, we have chief of party. So this is this idea that, and we've talked about this before when we studied parties, the president doesn't run the party, but man, don't they like stand for it? Like they become the face of the party. So which element of the party would this represent? Do you remember? They are the spokesperson. So what element was that? Like the party had three parts. Party in office or party in government, right, is what we called it. So they represent that through their actions. Okay? So let me just show you a couple quick examples, and then I'm going to turn you guys loose for working. Okay? All right, so to be honest with you, I like studying LBJ and watching how he was able to accomplish legislative change was amazing to me. And so here's an example of him. This is Senator Dirksen. He's the majority leader in the Senate at the time. And a lot of people refer to this as the Johnson treatment. It was basically like he was just very imposing, and he would kind of get in your face in this very kind of like soft Texas accent, and he would be like, you know, what are you going to do? How are we going to get this piece of legislation through? So what role do you guys think he's playing there? I would make the case for chief legislator, I think, because he knows that he can't use his job to accomplish this kind of domestic change. So he's going to use that his relationship to put that pressure on the legislature to do it. Alrighty, what role is that going to be? Chief of state. You know, to kind of show, ooh, I'm fun. I like sports. Woohoo! Alright, so here's W post 9/11. And I really hope that history will like remember the way he did this, because he did such an amazing job of really like extolling compassion to people, you know, and making people feel supported and kind of rallying us as a country in that way. This is what you guys studied when we studied the media. This is a picture from the fireside chat. So FDR, and when we talked about how that changed the relationship of the people and the presidency. So what role would this be? Just shout it out. Yeah, it's also chief of state. So like super different than the previous one, right? You know, but both very important, because if you don't connect to your president, then they're probably not going to be able to get their initiatives through, because they rely on public opinion in so many ways. All right. What role do you think you got here? Yeah, it's the military, so it's commander-in-chief. This is referred to as the football, is the nickname for it. So you went, oh, what is it, Sean? What's the football?
Got like launch codes in it, doesn't it?
Carries the codes for nuclear war. That's pretty powerful, right? Right, and so if the president travels, that has to go with him, because he's the one that has that power. So some pretty iconic images. President Reagan with Mikhail Gorbachev, he was the last leader of the Soviet Union before the Cold War came to an end, and their relationship was historically like really important. This is the one I told you about earlier, where Nixon went to China and worked to establish those relationships. So what role are all these presidents playing here? Chief diplomat, for sure. Okay, I got to tell you this one, because people love this. So the president can pardon. He can also pardon a turkey. So every year, before Thanksgiving, the president has a little ceremony where they pardon a turkey so that he will be given forgiveness and not have to become someone's Thanksgiving dinner. And it's really silly, but every president is...
What did he do wrong?
Being a turkey, that's it. Not very pretty, I guess. So every president